Sports history is filled with legendary victories and heartbreaking losses, but sometimes, the most unforgettable moments aren't about the final score, they're about controversy, betrayal, and scandal. These are the moments that shook the world of sports, sparking debates that continue decades later. Whether it was a game-changing call, an act of deception, or a crime that went beyond the playing field, these incidents left a permanent mark on history, proving that sports can be just as dramatic as any thriller. From a stolen Olympic gold medal to a goal scored by the hand of God, and from a vicious on-ice assault to a baseball scandal that shattered a sport's reputation, some controversies are so shocking that they transcend the games themselves. These events became more than just headlines. They became defining moments in sports culture, remembered for their impact, outrage, and the questions they left behind. Were these cases of outright cheating, bad luck, or something more sinister? Let's take a deep dive into some of the most controversial and scandalous moments in sports history. The 1972 Olympic men's basketball final wasn't just a game. It was a battleground of Cold War tensions, a night of chaos, and one of the most controversial moments in sports history. Imagine this: an unbeaten team, a gold medal on the line, and a bizarre sequence of events that left one team celebrating and the other refusing to even accept their medals. To this day, the U.S. team's silver medals remain unclaimed, locked away in Olympic archives, as a symbol of what they call a stolen victory. But was it really a robbery or just a game riddled with bad calls and politics? Let's break down the night that shook the world of basketball. The United States had never lost an Olympic basketball game before that night. With a perfect record of 63-0, they were the undisputed kings of the court. Their team consisted of the best college players in the country since professionals weren't allowed to participate. On the other hand, the Soviet Union had put together a squad determined to break the American dominance. And this wasn't just a basketball match. It was a Cold War battle in disguise. The game was intense from the start, with the Soviets maintaining a narrow lead. But as the final seconds ticked away, chaos unfolded. With just 3 seconds left on the clock, the Soviet Union led 49-48. That's when U.S. star Doug Collins intercepted a pass and sprinted towards the basket before being fouled hard. He stepped up to the free throw line under immense pressure. The world watched as he sank the first shot, tying the game. As he released his second shot, the horn suddenly blared, creating confusion. But the ball went in, and the scoreboard showed the U.S. leading 50-49. The Americans thought they had won, but the drama had just begun. The Soviet bench erupted, claiming they had called a timeout before Collins's second shot. Initially, the referees didn't acknowledge it, but after pressure from the Soviets, the officials reset the clock to 3 seconds. Then, in a highly questionable move, the Soviets illegally subbed in Ivan Adeshko. The ball was inbounded, but the attempt failed, and the U.S. players began celebrating what they believed was a hard-fought victory. However, this was only the beginning of a mind-boggling chain of events. At that moment, Renato William Jones, the Secretary General of FIBA, made an unprecedented decision. Despite having no legal authority over in-game decisions, he ordered the referees to replay the last 3 seconds again, a move that completely defied the rules. On the third attempt, Adeshko threw a long Hail Mary pass across the court, and Sergei Belov caught it, scoring an easy layup at the buzzer. The Soviet Union won 52-51. Just like that, history was rewritten in the most controversial way possible. The U.S. immediately filed an official protest, but the FIBA panel, which included judges from Soviet-friendly nations, ruled 3-2 in favor of the Soviet Union. Outraged, the U.S. team refused to accept their silver medals, calling the game an unfair political decision rather than a basketball contest. To this day, those silver medals remain locked away, untouched, in the Olympic archives. Was this a clear case of Cold War politics influencing sports? Or was it just an unfortunate sequence of referee errors? No matter which side you're on, one thing is certain: the 1972 Olympic basketball final remains one of the most disputed and controversial games in sports history. Diego Maradona's Hand of God goal is one of the most infamous moments in football history, A goal that should never have counted but ended up shaping an entire World Cup. It was a moment of genius, controversy, and pure audacity, a perfect representation of Maradona's legendary but complex legacy. But how did a blatant handball in the middle of a World Cup quarterfinal not only stand but also become one of the most talked about goals of all time? Let's dive into the events of that unforgettable match. The year was 1986, and Argentina was facing England in the quarterfinals of the FIFA World Cup in Mexico City. The rivalry between the two nations was already intense, with political tensions still lingering from the Falklands War. On the pitch, the first half was a hard-fought battle, ending with neither team finding the back of the net. But just 6 minutes into the second half, the game changed forever. An English midfielder, Steve Hodge, accidentally sent a looping ball high into his own penalty area. As England's goalkeeper, Peter Shilton, rushed forward to punch it away, Diego Maradona leaped up and, rather than using his head, used his left hand to punch the ball into the net. The rules of football were clear. No outfield player could touch the ball with their hands. But the referee, Ali bin Nasser, didn't see the handball, and with no VAR or modern replay technology to intervene, the goal stood. The English players erupted in protests, but the referee ignored their complaints. Maradona, aware of what had just happened, played it off. Later, when asked about the goal, he famously told reporters it was scored a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God. The phrase stuck, and thus, one of the most controversial goals in history was born. But what made this moment even more remarkable was what happened next. Just 4 minutes later, Maradona scored what is widely regarded as the greatest goal in World Cup history. He picked up the ball in his own half, dribbled past 5 English defenders with breathtaking skill, and slotted the ball past Shilton to double Argentina's lead. This goal, now known as the goal of the century, cemented his place as one of football's greatest players. Argentina went on to win the match 2-1 and eventually lifted the World Cup trophy, with Maradona at the heart of their success. His performance in that tournament became legendary, but the hand of God goal ensured that his legacy would always be a mix of brilliance and controversy. Even decades later, the debate continues. Was Maradona a genius who outsmarted the system, or did he get away with cheating? No matter where you stand, one thing is undeniable. His impact on football remains unmatched, and the hand of God goal is a moment that will never be forgotten. The 1994 Tonya Harding-Nancy Kerrigan scandal wasn't just a sports rivalry, it was a real-life drama that played out on the world stage, filled with ambition, betrayal, and a shocking act of violence. What was supposed to be a battle between two of the best figure skaters in the U.S. turned into one of the most infamous scandals in sports history. This wasn't just about who would win a gold medal, it was about how far someone would go to take out their competition. At the time, Nancy Kerrigan and Tonya Harding were America's top figure skaters, but they couldn't have been more different. Kerrigan was the elegant, graceful golden girl of U.S. figure skating, polished, well-liked, and seen as the sport's next big star. Harding, on the other hand, was the outsider, a working-class skater with raw talent and a rebellious attitude, known for her powerful jumps but lacking the refined image the sport often demanded. Then, on January 6, 1994, everything changed. As Kerrigan stepped off the ice after practice at the U.S. Figure Skating Championships in Detroit, a man suddenly appeared and struck her knee with a metal rod before running away. Kerrigan collapsed in pain, crying out, "Why? Why? Why me?" Moment that was caught on camera and played over and over again on television. While her injuries weren't severe, they were enough to force her to withdraw from the competition. With Kerrigan out, Harding won the national championship, securing her spot on the Olympic team. However, both skaters were ultimately named to the U.S. Olympic squad, setting up a dramatic showdown at the Winter Olympics in Lillehammer. But soon, the attack on Kerrigan took an even darker turn. Just days after the incident, the FBI began investigating rumors that Harding's bodyguard, Sean Eckert, and her ex-husband, Jeff Gillooly, had orchestrated the assault. Eckert quickly cracked under pressure and confessed, revealing that Gillooly, along with Shane Stant, the man who carried out the attack, and his uncle Derek Smith had planned the entire thing. Initially, Harding denied knowing anything about it, but investigators later found handwritten notes in her trash detailing Kerrigan's practice schedule, evidence that suggested she was more involved than she let on. Despite the scandal, Harding was still allowed to compete in the Olympics, but the pressure was overwhelming. During her free skate, she broke down in tears, claiming her skate laces were broken, and finished in 8th place. Meanwhile, Kerrigan, who had made an incredible comeback, skated beautifully and won the silver medal. The gold went to 16-year-old Oksana Byul of Ukraine. However, Kerrigan's reputation took a hit when she was caught on camera complaining about Byul, making her appear ungrateful despite the wave of public sympathy she had received. After the Olympics, the consequences came swiftly. On March 16th, Harding pleaded guilty to conspiracy to hinder prosecution and was sentenced to 3 years of probation along with a $160,000 fine. Unlike the others involved, she avoided jail time. However, the U.S. Figure Skating Association took harsher action. On June 30, 1994, Harding was stripped of her national title and banned for life from competing in any official events. The scandal left a lasting impact, leading to countless documentaries, TV specials, and even the 2017 movie I, Tonya, which presented Harding's side of the story. As for Kerrigan, she turned professional after the Olympics, focusing on ice shows and TV appearances. The Harding-Kerrigan saga wasn't just a sports controversy, it was a spectacle of media frenzy, ambition, and downfall. It raised serious questions about competition, class, and how far people are willing to go to win. Even decades later, it remains one of the most shocking moments in sports history. This wasn't just an attack on a player, it was an attack on the sport itself. Monica Seles was at the peak of her career in the early 1990s, dominating women's tennis like no one else. At just 16, she had already won her first Grand Slam title, and by the age of 19 she had become the undisputed world #1. But on April 30th, 1993, everything changed in a shocking and horrifying moment that no one saw coming. During a routine match at a tournament in Hamburg, Germany, Seles was sitting courtside, taking a break between sets, when a man suddenly rushed onto the court and stabbed her in the back. The attack happened in full view of the crowd, yet it was so unexpected that for a moment, no one even knew what had just happened. Seles described the chilling moment in her autobiography, recalling the searing pain and the terrifying sight of her attacker's raised knife, ready to strike again. The man responsible, Günter Parsche, wasn't just any deranged spectator. He was an obsessed fan of Steffi Graf, Seles's biggest rival. In his mind, Seles had taken the #1 ranking away from Graf, and he wanted to fix it. His horrific method? Attacking a teenage girl in front of thousands of people. Seles was lucky to survive with only a half-inch wound in her upper back, but the psychological scars would last much longer. She was rushed to the hospital, suffering from both physical pain and shock. The attack raised immediate speculation. Was it politically motivated? After all, Seles was Serbian, and tensions in Yugoslavia were running high. But the Hamburg police quickly ruled that out. This was a personal attack, driven by a fanatical obsession with a sports rivalry. And then came the most outrageous part: Parche's punishment, or lack of it. In October 1993, he was convicted but received only a 2-year suspended sentence. No jail time, nothing. The justification? That it wasn't a premeditated murder attempt but an act of fan obsession. The tennis world was outraged. Martina Navratilova called the ruling insane and nationality-driven, arguing that if someone had attacked Graf instead, the punishment would have been much harsher. For Seles, the damage was already done. She, too, wouldn't return to competitive tennis for over 2 years. And while she did make a remarkable comeback, even winning the 1996 Australian Open, she was never quite the same player. The fearless, dominant teenager who had taken over the sport had been robbed of her prime years. Though she continued playing until 2003 and outfielder officially retired in 2008, the White Sox entered the series as favorites against the Cincinnati Reds. But
Today,
behind
Monica,
the scenes, Sales is remembered as one of the greatest to ever play the
frustrated
game.
by team
But her
owner
story
Charles.
is also a reminder of one of the darkest moments in sports history. He allegedly
a moment
even
when an
refused
athlete's
to pay
career,
for players' laundry,
safety,
and
several
life
White
were
Sox
put at
players
risk, conspired
all
with
because of a
gamblers to
fan
rig
who
the
took his
outcome of the
obsession too
championship.
far.
The plan? Lose the series in exchange for money. The 1919 Black Sox scandal. Before Game 1, when strange betting patterns
baseball's
raised suspicion,
integrity was sold for
despite
cash.
the White Sox
1919
being the superior
Chicago
team.
White Sox
Large
were supposed to
bets
be one of the
suddenly poured
greatest
in on the
teams
Reds
in baseball history.
As the series unfolded,
Instead,
the
they
signs
became
of a fix
infamous for
became
throwing
obvious.
the World Series in what remains
one
the
of the
biggest
league's
scandal
best
the sport
pitchers made
has
wild
ever
mistakes.
seen.
Key defensive errors occurred at just the right moments. And while some players like Buck Weaver played honestly, they had knowledge of the scheme and never reported it. However, the plot didn't go smoothly. The gamblers who had promised large payouts started withholding money, leading to some players attempting to win back games. But by Game 8, it was over. The Reds were World Series champions, and the fixers had succeeded. The fallout came in 1920, when a grand jury convened to investigate the scandal. 8 players, including Jackson and Sakat, were indicted. Despite initial confessions, which mysteriously disappeared before the trial, the players were acquitted. But baseball's new Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis didn't care about the court's decision. He permanently banned all 8 players from professional baseball. Jackson, who had batted .375 in the series and claimed he played to win, was one of the biggest casualties. His name became synonymous with the scandal, and despite his legendary skills, he was shut out from the Hall of Fame. His involvement remains debated. Some believe he was coerced into taking money.